Welcome to PM Express. My name is Nana Sakwal and today we're coming to you from the International Conference Center. You may wonder, what are we doing here? It is something very dear to my heart, so throughout the interview, if I get very emotional, sentimental, and take things very personal, please forgive me, because this is a subject dear to my heart. What we're talking about is the strategic tool for poverty reduction and bridging the inequality gap in Ghana. And when that is done, I probably won't have any job, since 90% of what I do is always championing about the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and I definitely believe that it is not fair. I also don't believe that the haves should get less, but maybe the haves should have more so that they can pull the have-nots along. But somewhere in between, we are missing. I don't know why. With me to discuss this issue is the Honorable Minister herself, Nana Oyelita, and I say she's a minister for everything: gender, children, and social protection. What else is left? What else is left? And also to discuss this is another very, very important person who's been very supportive of the ministry and the nation at large, is Peter Ranyo, who is a social protection expert for UNICEF. And we're just going to find out, how is it that we got here? And I'll start with Nana. Nana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nana.
I've been waiting for you for a while.
Yes, yes.
And I just want to find out, with our gap between the haves and have-nots, with our neglect for the have-nots, I mean, how did we get here? I know every nation will have people who are struggling in there. I'm sure even in heaven there may be some angels struggling, but ours is too significant.
It's interesting you say this, Nana, because the data shows otherwise. So the evidence is that we have been able to achieve MDG 1, that Ghana has been able over the decade to halve poverty. That's from 50 and 40% of our population being poor. We now have 24%, and then extremely poor 8%. That is the Ghana Living Standard Survey. So the evidence will show that poverty has reduced. But like you're saying, the gap, that what we call technically the inequality gap, is widening. And that is why in January 2013, the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection was set up, where government has placed a high priority on using social protection as a tool to reduce poverty further and then also to narrow the inequality gap.
Peter, let me come to you, because it's amazing how, sometimes we set a target, and it comes from the international bodies that, well, if you earn $3 a day, well, you're rich. But the same people who are telling you to earn $3 a day and classify you as rich probably have a minimum wage of sometimes £30 or maybe, $25, an hour, not even a day, Yet still, if you are able to achieve $3 in 24 hours, I'll pat you on the back and say, aren't you, negatively, setting the bar too low for people to achieve?
Well, to some extent you're right, but keep in mind that when we talk about $1 or $2 a day figure, it's relative to each country. So this is just a number to compare across country. But yes, you're right. I mean, $1 a day, the $2 a day, the different benchmarks are only about extreme poverty, are about achieving a minimum food subsistence level. But we need to aim at much more. Poverty is not about just food, it's much more. It's about happiness as well. It's about having access to opportunities. And I think this is changing, and this view of $1 or $2 a day approach is changing. And in the next Millennium Development Goals, we are pretty sure they will mirror this change in the benchmarks.
Nana, let me come back to you with the same question.
Yeah.
Every nation will need help, one way or the other. Because of globalization, it's very difficult to isolate yourself. If they set you know, a $3 target for you, are we unable to go in a room and say, looking at us, we are not at war, we don't have farming, we don't have this, so maybe we should set maybe $5 or maybe $7 for ourselves, and even if we achieve 6, we know that we did something. Can we do that?
Well, we can, but the arrival of the $2 a day, $3 is an international benchmark, and there's consensus globally, and there's evidence and data to back this. So a lot of research, a lot of work has gone in. And because it's a global target that we have 200 plus countries all aiming to achieve that standard, so then there's an agreement on a certain figure, $2, under $2 a day. It helps. It creates some uniformity. It creates some standards that countries can achieve. Like that basically is the barest minimum. And so you can surpass that. That would be fine. You'll be patted on the back. But there's a need to achieve that. But even with that, we are struggling in terms of African governments and countries because we have a purse, we have resources, and we have to take out for A, for B, for C, for D. So even with that is an issue. And so I believe that there's a need to provide some standard. So I would support a benchmark or a standard of $2 or $3. If we go past it, that's fine for us.
The difficulty is if you set that as a mark, you aim for it, then it becomes difficult to go past it. And very few people will go past it because the aim now is that let me earn $2. But if it's like $10, people would probably get 5 and still think, oh, I didn't make it. But at least they got $5 rather than 2.
Now, $5 translates into 15 Ghana cedis or thereabouts. And so let's look at people's earning power, people's purchasing power. Let's look at the minimum wage. So a lot goes into it. But we're a sovereign country, so we can decide that, well, globally, we're looking at under $2 a day. But then nationally, we will look at 6 or 8 Ghana cedis a day. So since we're a sovereign country, we're at liberty to do that. But because we have these research reports and data, surveys coming out, and we want all countries to be reporting on us against a benchmark, we use the $2, we use the $3. So when Nigeria is reporting, it reports us against $2 or us against $3. It creates some uniformity, and then we are also able to analyze and assess, and then very importantly to compare, so that we can draw on best practices. For instance, we have Her Excellency Marcia Lopez, who is here from Brazil, who was a former Minister for Social Development under President Lula da Silva. Because we have a standard of under $2 a day as a poverty benchmark and all of that, we can compare progress we have made with Brazil. We can look up to Brazil and say that Brazil has been able to lift millions of its citizens out of poverty, that they have 30 million to 30 to 40 or 38 million persons on their Bolsa Familia and all that. We have maybe about 77,006 households and about maybe 200 or 232,000. So how did Brazil do it? Because that benchmark of $2 is there, which is applicable to Brazil, applicable to Nigeria, and applicable to us. We can make a comparison and then learn from Brazil how they were able to do it. And even in achieving that, we are able to measure. So that is how the $2 measure helps us.
Please, let me come to you. Another thing I found within Ghana, but you being UNICEF could have a bird's eye view is, we as soon as they say social intervention, we just assume that everybody's going to be poor. So everybody has to go to boarding school, therefore everybody has to be subsidized, everybody has to go to hospital, everybody has to go for free. But there are a good percentage who could have paid or even go to abroad and pay. But I don't know if you find that it's with every African country or it's just us, but I feel that there are people who are benefiting from social intervention who should actually be paying towards it rather than benefiting.
Yeah, I mean, in this, when we talk about social protection or social security, that's how it's usually known in Europe. You always have two systems. One is contributory system and the non-contributory system. Now, the contributory system is mostly for workers in the formal sector that can actually contribute, and the non-contributory for those that work usually in the informal sector or cannot work because they are disabled and so on. And it does happen that households that in theory could contribute don't, and they have access to other social protection. They are normal. They are called inclusion errors. Very common in all programs in Africa, all programs in Europe as well, in very developed country. I'm Italian, and it does happen in Italy. The issue is more on managing those errors. Eliminating those errors is impossible. And we can say, specifically to Ghana, because now we are talking about Ghana, and talking about LEAP, which is a program that, as UNICEF, we've been supporting from the start. We have supported the government in implementing this program, shows that inclusion errors are not very high compared to other African countries. So this is a very good sign. I mean, the targeting of LEAP, it's one of the best in Africa. We know there is a lot of anecdotal evidence that I've seen, that probably the minister has seen as well, but overall, the LEAP program targets the right people.
So LEAP, I've always congratulated you for LEAP.
Yes.
I've been a supporter.
Yes.
One of the few ministers that I tick.
Oh, thank God. I would thank God for that. Yes.
And you are in my tick book.
Thank
so
you.
I support you for LEAP. But are you overwhelmed?
We are overwhelmed as to the numbers that we have to cater for.
That's what
So, for instance, studies have been done, Peter supported, that we are only catering for 1 person out of 10 that we ought to be catering for. 1 out of 10. So we have 9 extremely poor persons that, or is it households, Peter? Is it households or persons? 1 out of 10.
People.
1 out of 10. So 9 persons that should be on LEAP that are not on LEAP. So that is an area of concern for us as a government. But we also want to ensure sustainability, because it's all about resources. From 7 to 8 million, we've climbed up to 38 million. And I'm hoping that tomorrow the Minister of Finance is going to allocate 47 million to us for LEAP. We are looking at increasing the numbers. Our target was 100,000 December. We may make about 90,000 looking at the figures. And then for next year, add on another 50,000 households. We're going to the IMF. A package will be announced. It will affect also some of our households. And so also, even with the IMF, we're also negotiating that social protection, and government and cabinet has accepted and approved that social protection will be a central pillar of the IMF package. So yes, overwhelming in the sense that ideally we should cater for all the extremely poor persons, but for one reason or the other we are not able to do that. But we are progressively, at least we've set our targets, and we are progressively working towards that target.
So with this, IMF will come with sanctions, and are we assured that social protection is not going to be one of the factors that will snip this bit because it's costing you?
No, it's going to be a central pillar.
So that will
yes, that will be safe.
Okay, then my next question is, there are certain age group which maybe we won't be able to get out, but I read a story about this woman in the north who has 2 children and has to just boil water and put pepper and salt in it because otherwise, they're going to go to bed hungry, and just to give them a sense of food, has to put just pepper and salt in there, and she's got like 3 kids. Maybe the lady we might not get out of LEAP, but how do we make sure that the children get out of the LEAP?
Yeah, well, before we even talk about getting out of the LEAP, I'd like to talk about what we're doing to address some of these issues. So, for instance, in targeting and identifying beneficiaries, those who should get the cash for LEAP, we've looked at the hard evidence. Which districts are the poorest in Ghana? Fortunately, the Statistical Service has the poverty ranking. So there's a figure, there's a percentage for every district in Ghana. And that is what we've used. So in identifying the districts that should benefit, we go to Statistical Service, give us a ranking. We look at the first to the last, and then we do the ranking. So that poor woman would be in the northern region. The 3 northern regions receive the highest number in terms of beneficiaries. Apart from that, USAID and through UNICEF is supporting us with $12 million over the next 3 or 4 years?
4 years.
Over the next 4 years to target 6,000 to 8,000 pregnant women and women with children under 2 years in the north of in the northern part of Ghana. This is because of stunting, where you have a child who may look 8 years, but it's actually 13 years, and then also infant mortality. So we're doing strategic targeting for LEAP now. So we're going to put all these mothers on LEAP. So then this woman in the north would be able to get some money at the end of the month to feed her children. Next year too, we're starting the graduation, because you said, how do they leap out of poverty? So we're going to start designing a system where they can now migrate, if it is possible, to migrate to, and then to benefit from less debt or to benefit from Maslow. And that is the beauty of our ministry coordinating social. We are not managing, because school feeding is still being managed under local government and Ministry of Education. A free textbook is still being managed by Ministry of Education. National health is still being managed. But we would coordinate all the activities, yes.
Peter, I mean, how frustrating is it for you? Because you look at a country like Denmark, Sweden, you look at the climates they have, and they don't complain about food shortages. Here we are with 12 months of sunshine and rain and land and able bodies, and still complaining about lack of food. I mean, how frustrating is it for you?
Well, I mean, let's see the country. The country, Ghana is a beautiful country. You can't be frustrated in this beautiful country. But there are some structural issues, and low productivity here is one of the most important issues. Low productivity in agriculture. We think, as UNICEF, I actually was also in other UN agencies like the FAO in the past, and we think that the LEAP can actually help. One of the constraints that poor households have is about constraints in their production capacity. And LEAP has been shown to unlock some of these productive capacity, investments in agriculture and so on. So talking about food security and talking about the poorest household, because that's what we should talk about, that's what we should focus on. We think that the government, with the support of development partners, are really working in the right direction and are supporting households to increase their productivity in agriculture, in food, but also looking more at a longer-term investments. Productivity is not only about food, it's about education, it's also about being healthy. And LEAP and the many other interventions have shown, we heard it today, have shown that kids in poor households are being targeted by some social protection programs, are sending their kids to school more, are staying in school. And another thing that we need probably to understand better is, are they learning more? That's probably a key question that we all should look at.
Well, I'm going to take a break here, and then when I come back, I'm going to look at if the kids are learning more, and also we're going to look at people who are living with disability. Don't move. Well, thank you very much for staying tuned. A strategic tool for poverty reduction and bridging the inequality gap in Ghana. Now, how can you do that without education? One magic word or magic thing that could get anyone out of poverty is education. And I have here Minister for Everything, everything and all important things. Now, education. I mean, while we are supporting them with LEAP, which is very good, how are we looking at education, especially if you leave the urban areas? Because that's one magic tool that will give you, reduce your headache.
Yes. In fact, one of the guest speaker's speech earlier this morning, he presented a international research to show how the more educated you are, the less likely that you'll be poor. I mean, there was a clear, and from primary, no education, he looked at the numbers, second primary education, secondary and tertiary. So education is very key, and that's why quite a huge chunk of our budget goes to education. Because we want the extreme poor to leap out of poverty, there's one condition tied to receiving the LEAP and the cash transfer. Your children must be enrolled in school and they must attend school. Okay. And ISA, Institute of Statistical and Economic Research, did an impact analysis of LEAP. And it's clear that enrollment rose by 7%. And there's a clear linkage between the LEAP and then school enrollment. Okay. But like Peter said, we haven't looked at what is being taught in the school. And so it obviously helps. The issue is that the extremely poor are extremely vulnerable. So that's where if you have an extremely poor person, would rather let the child go to the stone quarry and engage in the worst forms of child labor. But when you are able to cushion that household and provide some income, that may help and then address that issue, that vulnerability issue. We need to do a lot more research in that regard in terms of looking at the linkages. And that is why it is important for us, moving on to the next stage of social protection in Ghana, to look at linking the programs. Because, for instance, the school feeding program, how do we link up with LEAP? How do we ensure that school feeding goes on in the very, very poor communities and in the very poor districts? It is only when we link up, and we call it graduation in social protection, that it would help. How do we make sure that we have data that will track a woman on LEAP so that she can also migrate to Maslow and get some loans to do some work? So clearly, because once she's able to do that, and once we're able to make sure that the education bit is addressed, the person may find employment, and then it will also address extreme poverty. So yes, you've got it that education and poverty closely linked, and we need to make sure that we focus on that, and we make sure that those who are extremely poor are able to go to school, because it will help in getting them out of poverty.
So Lisa, then my question to you then is, even though we are grateful that you're supporting LEAP and everything, do you have any programs to make sure support education outside of urban areas, so that in the next 10 years' time, the amount of people on LEAP will automatically reduce and probably even diminish if we can push education?
Oh yeah, well, UNICEF education is the key. We UNICEF believe that education is the key to development, is the key to reducing poverty, and obviously we have major programs here in Ghana as well. We have a section that only deals with education, that works closely with the education system in supporting government in a very specific way, which is in terms of teaching, teacher trainings and so on, but also in terms of monitoring. One of the key issues in Ghana in education, it's about teacher absenteeism, and there is no way you can actually have facts about this. And now the education section with the government, they are starting, they're piloting a new way. It's called the school report cards. It's an electronic way to monitor if teachers are actually in school, which is one of the key issues. If kids want to go to school and are able to go to school because of the LEAP program as well, if there is no teacher, all the efforts and investments are basically it's a waste of resources. But yes, I mean, education, it's a priority for UNICEF Ghana.
Now, before I move to disability, you see, we have like a universal education where the child in cantonments, the child in Edumasa, the child in Akwamufie are all studying the same thing, even though their needs and the environment may be different. I don't know, have we gotten to the stage where we should mix match a bit so that, you know, the child in Edumasa's education will be more tailored to his or her environment, and so that it become more beneficial, so that he doesn't necessarily have to leave Edumasa to come and find work in Accra. His education or her education would be needed locally, and then the drift may slow down.
Yes, that's where social protection comes in. And so under education, we have the capitation grant as a social protection intervention, school feeding, free textbook, free uniform. We have to work on more effective targeting so that that child, that girl in Akwamufie would be able to write the same exams as the boy in cantonment, because her environment and her community has been taken into consideration. So she has been supported by capitation, by school feeding, by free textbooks, so that she can also acquire the knowledge and write the same exam. So that's about the equitable or the equal and just, or equitable and just society, where you acknowledge and recognize some of the shortcomings, development shortcomings, and then assist and support as a government by providing these social protection interventions. And that is why targeting the right geographical locations and also targeting the right people who need to be supported by government is so very important. And that's why a major priority of this government is to set up the household registry, very much along the lines of the Benezia Buto program, or even the Cadastronico of Brazil. This is the registry. These are the people in Ghana who need to be supported because they're extremely poor. And so any social protection program you have, you need to collect or get your data. And then you also need to give this household registry the list of beneficiaries that have benefited. Because now you could go to a district and have one person benefiting from the disability fund, benefiting from LEAP, benefiting from this and Maslog, less debt. You move to the next district or community, there's a person with disability who is not benefiting from anything at all. So this database of extremely poor people will help to streamline all this, because it will be picked up automatically that this person is benefiting from A, B, and it's all electronic.
Okay.
Yes.
Now this is a difficult one for you, Nana.
Yes.
Apart from the state not giving you enough money because you're running all ministries as one, I'm looking at disabled people. Our attitude toward disabled people is even less than, you know, what the state is giving you. So how do you deal with, number one, we as a people are not very empathic towards disabled people. The state hasn't got enough money to give it to you, and then you are there to look after them. So how do you do this?
It's work in progress. It's work in progress. I look at it as building blocks. So we said we take one thing at a time. So what we're presently focusing on under the Secretariat of the National Council on Persons with Disability is that in 2 years' time, it'll be 10 years since the Disability Act was passed. And a moratorium was placed in the Act by Parliament that, okay, we're giving all owners of public buildings 10 years. After 10 years, your building, your structure has to be disability friendly. So we said, okay, there's a whole range of issues we need to address for persons with disability. Let's start with that. So we've been able to get some funding, and we'll be starting next year to ensure that public places are disability compliant. Parliament, the Social Welfare Committee have already started. They went on a visit to the N1 to look at it, and they've also called the Millennium Challenge Account People Authority and said, how come that you constructed this major road and it is not disability friendly. So they've gone to other places, public places. And apart from that, we're also drafting the legislative instruments for persons with disability. And we also acknowledge that we have challenges with resources for this work, but we're still forging on.
No, you see, this law was passed, we're given a 10-year grace period. We have 1 year and 2 months to go. I know for a fact that in Upper East, there's only 5% that are now compliant, so they have 95% to go. Within Accra, I don't know how many, but lots and lots of very significant places, both private and
even our ministry.
Even our own multimedia, you know, are at fault of this.
Are you disability? You have disability friendly?
We do.
So you passed them. The two of us have failed.
The two of us have failed.
You know, and
very recently.
So I'm just, if this is our attitude towards it, it becomes then institutional, individual, and here we are probably about 10% of the population living with one disability or not, either mental, you know. So I mean, how do we go forward?
It is a problem. I believe that once we have a plan, we take the steps. I acknowledge that it's work, it's a challenge, and it's work in progress that we need to encourage, strongly recommend that more resources be made available for programs that support persons with disability. I'll be the first person to say that. Let's next year we'll see better planning and better allocation of resources. That's what I can say.
Peter, one thing that also, you know, aside education, which is, you know, very useful, is information. Because once people are informed, you know, knowledgeable, you know, knowledge is power. What can we do to inform, especially people who are under the poverty level? Because with some information, I mean, they would be able to get themselves out of that situation.
Well, I mean, we're not talking about education now. We're talking more about a two-way communication, sure, where people can actually start demanding for services. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a social accountability, that's how we call it. And there are also some, if I may, some good initiatives. Something's going to be actually launched next week. Mm-hmm. It's called the District League Table, which is a ranking of all districts of Ghana. And the idea is sharing with the wider public of the level in different indicators, actually in 6 indicators of their own districts, for them to start demanding for more in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of security. So there are some initiatives. In some cases are from the private sector, from NGOs. But I think, if I may also talk about the LEAP, there is an initiative on the case management, which is a way through which households can talk back to the government and report for things that are not working, and demanding why things are not working, and demanding for things to happen. So you can see there are things happening. It should be something much bigger. The sense of social accountability should be there throughout every intervention, every government program, but I see there are signals that this is starting happening.
Just to say that I believe that civil society needs to scale up. You know, like we have vibrant civil society, governance, accountability, gender-based violence, reproductive health, and we need to hear and see more in terms of civil society holding government accountable for implementing social protection programs and also assessment of government's performance in terms of social protection. And we have a social protection sector working group made up of civil society, governments, and the development partners. So this really helps and provides a platform for sharing ideas and also for, you know, keeping each other in check.
Now my time is up, but I need to give you 1 minute. I went to Fadama, which is Sodom and Gomorrah. Yes. Now the people there really love you, but they don't seem to see much of you. Yeah. I mean, what are we going to do for Fadama?
Okay.
Briefly, 1 minute.
Yes. What are we going to do for Fadama? The first immediate intervention is setting up a services, I was thinking of a name yesterday, a services center manned by social welfare officers and others to act as a referral point to provide immediate support and need. Another, and I was talking to Marcia, and she said, we have a database of street people. Street people can go to Parliament. They have a voice in Parliament. They have, we also support them with the Bolsa Familia. And this is something that we haven't really looked at. And so for Fadama, we'll be looking at the support. Basically looking at reducing vulnerabilities and also looking at getting alternate employment, because it is a very sad situation. It is a catastrophe, and it's something that we are working on. And in fact, in the research that was done on social protection, that was the gap, that there isn't much in terms of social protection support for adolescent girls, health facilities and all that.
Yeah.
And so we will, is a priority for our ministry.
Okay, I went there, so maybe I'll come and tell you what their concerns are.
I'll be going there on Thursday, but I'll be happy to hear from you.
Sure. But I want to say thank you very much. I know it's been a long day, but you still granted me this interview. I am grateful as well for God and country and for social protection. Folks, stay tuned. We are coming back with a surprise guest. Well, thank you very much for staying. And as I told you, I have a surprise guest for you. And this is no other person than Professor Marcia Lopez. Now, she was the former minister for social development and also the fight against hunger in, guess what, Brazil. So their problem is tenfold ours. And this Iron Lady, as I called her, championed that cause, and they have a success story to tell in the Brazil history. Welcome, Professor.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. Now, first of all, I want to find out where you got the political will to champion the fight against hunger.
Gostaria de saber onde você teve a vontade política para combater a fome.
Em 2003, o presidente Lula foi eleito presidente do Brasil.
Okay, in 2003, President Lula was elected president of Brazil.
E como operário,
and as a worker,
como migrante de uma região muito pobre do país,
coming from a very poor region in the country,
ele desejou ser presidente do Brasil para enfrentar a fome, para combater a fome.
It was his desire
e com muita determinação, com muita convicção,
to fight hunger and poverty.
Ele criou o Fome Zero,
and then with a lot of conviction,
integrando vários programas sociais.
He created the program Zero
Garantiu
Hunger.
Alimentação escolar para todas as crianças do Brasil.
Program for all the children in Brazil.
Agricultura familiar,
family agriculture,
estimulando a produção dos pequenos produtores.
To stimulate production of agricultural products.
E implantando o grande programa de transferência de renda, o Bolsa Família.
And then he also introduced the transfer of resources funds
que garantiu,
to help Bolsa Família.
Que garantiu renda para as famílias.
This one ensured the kind of revenue for families. This program ensured revenue for families.
A matrícula e a permanência das crianças na escola.
And then the enrollment of children and retention of children in school. Also part of this program.
E o cuidado com a saúde das crianças e suas famílias.
Including the health services, healthcare for children and their families.
E hoje são 14 milhões de famílias que estão no Bolsa Família.
Today, about 40,000 families and children are benefiting from this program.
E que não passam mais fome.
They no longer suffer hunger. 14 million children and families are benefiting from this program.
14
million.
Wow. Yeah.
E essas famílias hoje não passam fome, os seus filhos estão estudando.
Families no longer experience hunger. The children are in school studying.
estão se profissionalizando, aprendendo uma profissão.
They are taking professional courses. Children are taking professional courses.
As mulheres trabalham em cooperativas.
Women are working in cooperatives, societies. Yeah.
Mais de 38 milhões de pessoas saíram da pobreza.
So more than 38 million people have been moved out of poverty.
E pela primeira vez, o Brasil saiu do mapa da fome do mundo.
So for the first time, Brazil is no longer part of the world map of hunger.
That I must congratulate you.
Parabéns.
Muito obrigada.
Parabéns.
So how do you get the farmers and the schools to coordinate so that the team works? Because we also have farmers and we have schools, but they don't seem to work hand in hand. So we have like foods go waste on the farms because nobody's buying them. How do they get the farmers and the schools to talk?
Como você conseguir coordenar atividades dos fazendeiros e escolas? Por exemplo, aqui nós temos fazendeiros e os seus produtos se estragam. Agora, qual é a coordenação nesse programa entre os fazendeiros, produtos e alimentação escolar?
Eu tive a responsabilidade
I was responsible for
de coordenar o grupo de trabalho do Fome Zero.
I coordinated the team that was working on Zero Hunger.
Com 13 ministérios.
With 3 ministries.
13
ministries.
ministérios. E cada ministério da agricultura, da saúde, da educação,
each ministry agree,
desenvolvimento social,
social development,
cultura,
culture, Ministry of Culture,
direitos humanos,
human
todos
rights.
Participam.
All these ministries
e cada um coordena os programas referentes à sua política.
Each one coordinated programs in relation to its policies.
Então, 70% dos alimentos que os brasileiros comem vem da agricultura familiar.
70% of the food that Brazilians consume come from agricultural produce in the country.
Então, criamos um programa que se chama Programa de Aquisição de Alimentos da Agricultura Familiar.
So we have a program which is termed Program for the Acquisition of the Products of Family Agriculture.
O governo, através desse ministério, a sua equipe técnica, cadastra os agricultores familiares.
So the government, through this ministry, is able to register all the farmers. It registers all the farmers.
Em todas as regiões do país.
In all the regions of the country.
E dá assistência técnica.
And then the government provides technical assistance.
E garante a compra da produção.
And government guarantees the purchase of the produce from the farmers.
O pequeno produtor, o pescador.
Produce products from small scale farmers, fishermen.
O produtor de leite.
Dairy farmers.
De frutas.
Fruit,
de legumes,
those who produce vegetables,
de grãos.
Grains.
Então, eles produzem, o governo garante esta produção, então ele compra a produção.
How about storage?
So
storage.
They produce, and the government guarantees
to buy.
That,
to buy. Where would they store it? Storage.
Onde a gente vai estocar?
Não, imediatamente, porque o Brasil é muito grande. Nós temos 27 estados, são regiões aqui.
Brazil is very big. We have about 27 regions.
E tem quase 5.600 municípios.
We have a lot of more than 5,000 municipal areas and big cities.
E nós temos uma companhia nacional de abastecimento.
We have a national supply company.
E tem galpões em vários locais.
We have got sheds constructed in all areas, sheds.
E temos governadores e prefeitos.
We have governors for the states and then mayors for the cities.
Que participam desse programa.
They are also obliged to participate in this program.
À medida em que compra os produtos,
so when they buy the products,
esses produtos são distribuídos nas escolas.
These products are distributed to the schools.
Para alimentação escolar.
For the program, school feeding program.
Para os hospitais.
They are sent to the hospitals.
Para os abrigos.
For shelters, shelters that have been created
e para as comunidades mais pobres.
And then this also goes to very poor communities. The distribution of these products.
Nós trabalhamos tanto no fortalecimento da agricultura familiar.
So we work to support or strengthen agricultural productivity.
Incentivamos a permanência dos agricultores na terra.
And we want to incentivate, motivate the workers to continue tilling the land.
E também garantimos a segurança alimentar das crianças.
And this also goes to ensure food security
das
for
suas
children
famílias
and
e da comunidade.
Their families and the various communities.
So then my next question is, I mean, you have 45 million school children, you have now the hospitals, the shelters, the poor communities. How does Brazil fund it?
Como se financia este programa? Com diferentes componentes.
Recurso do orçamento do governo federal.
So the source of the major source of financing comes from the government budget.
O Brasil tem uma política tributária, fiscal, uma política de arrecadação de impostos.
Brazil has policies about collection of income, what do we call it, revenue, and then taxes. Yeah, we have different laws.
Okay.
E o presidente Lula tomou uma decisão política.
So the former president Lula took a political decision
de dar prioridade
to give priority
para as famílias pobres.
To give priority to poor and needy families.
E de desenvolver cada região do Brasil.
So for this reason to develop all the regions in Brazil.
Antes do presidente Lula assumir o governo.
Before Lula assumed the governance of the country.
Esse Ministério de Desenvolvimento Social.
The Ministry of Social Development.
Tinha um orçamento de 5 bilhões de dólares.
5 billion had an annual budget of $5 billion. That is before the President Lula came here. This
Hoje,
today,
o Ministério tem 34 bilhões de dólares.
This ministry has $34 billion.
Wow. E esse recurso chega para todas as famílias brasileiras, através da transferência de renda do Bolsa Família.
And this money is enough to reach every poor family.
Para os agricultores familiares.
It goes to farmers who are head of families.
O governo implantou 1 milhão de cisternas. Que é uma tecnologia barata que faz a captação da água da chuva numa região de seca que não chovia.
The government has been able to construct 1 million, what do you call it, water tanks. Kind of water to collect, to harvest rainwater, to help areas which are dry.
It's very impressive. Oh, Susan, that's what time would allow me in the interview.
Oh, so isso.
I hope she's going to be in town for longer, and I'll try and find you because I need an extensive interview.
Aí nós vamos realizar uma outra entrevista.
Tá bem.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
E você não vai me perguntar nada de Ghana?
So you didn't ask me anything about Ghana.
Yes, I was going to find out. That's why I need an extended interview to find out how do we implement all these beautiful ideas here.
Yeah.
But my producer is all signaling me and tapping my neck behind the But I'll find you and come back because it's all too impressive, and I think you need to find out how they did it so we also do it too. Well, folks, as I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again, and thank you very much for watching.